The smell of smoke and beans still haunts abandoned homesteads across the American frontier, where recipes born from desperation created some of the most resourceful cooking in our nation's history. These forgotten dishes fed cowboys, settlers, and pioneers who carved civilization from wilderness with nothing but cast-iron pots and prairie ingenuity. Before refrigeration, grocery stores, or cookbooks, survival meant turning scraps into sustenance and creating meals from whatever the land provided. Campfire beans. Before canned beans existed, cowboys soaked dried beans overnight and cooked them slowly over coals that never died. These weren't ordinary beans, they were swimming in rendered fat, molasses, and whatever seasonings the cook could scrounge up. The pot sat at the edge of the fire, simmering for hours while cowboys worked, creating beans with a smoky flavor that penetrated every kernel. Salt pork or bacon provided fat and flavor, while molasses or brown sugar added sweetness to balance the smoke. Wild onions, when available, went into the pot, along with dried chilies that some cooks carried from Texas. The beans cooked so slowly that they became creamy inside while absorbing all the flavors around them. A pot of campfire beans could feed a crew for days, and the longer they cooked, the better they tasted. Cowboys ate them for breakfast, lunch, and dinner, often using biscuits to scoop them up. Sourdough pancakes. Every chuckwagon worth its salt carried a sourdough starter, a living culture passed from cook to cook like a sacred flame. Cowboys called it their pet because it needed daily feeding and care, but it rewarded them with fluffy pancakes that could fill empty bellies on cold mornings. The starter lived in a clay crock wrapped in blankets during winter nights to keep the yeast alive. Trail cooks mixed the batter with whatever liquid they had, water, milk, or even coffee, and cooked them on greased griddles over open fires. The tangy flavor came from wild yeasts captured from the air, creating a taste no modern bakery can replicate. These pancakes were often the difference between a good day and a hungry one on the trail. Cowboys would stack them high, pour on molasses or honey when available, and fuel up for long days in the saddle. Son of a gun stew. When a calf was butchered on the range, nothing went to waste, especially the organs that spoiled quickly in the heat. Son of a gun stew became the solution, mixing heart, liver, kidneys, and sweetbreads with whatever vegetables could be found. The name came from polite company. The original name was far more colorful. Chuckwagon cooks would brown the organ meats in rendered fat, then add wild onions, prairie turnips, or canned tomatoes if they were lucky. The stew simmered for hours, breaking down tough tissues into tender morsels that provided essential nutrients missing from a diet of beef and beans. Cowboys learned to appreciate this iron-rich meal that kept scurvy at bay and provided energy for hard work. The dish required skill to prepare properly, as overcooking made the organs tough and bitter, while undercooking left them chewy and unpalatable. Chuckwagon biscuits. The chuckwagon cook, known as Cookie, held legendary status partly because of his ability to create light, fluffy biscuits over an open fire. These weren't ordinary biscuits. They were made in Dutch ovens, with coals piled on top and underneath, creating an even heat that would make any modern baker jealous. The secret lay in the technique. Cold fat cut into flour until it resembled coarse crumbs, then buttermilk or sourdough starter added quickly and mixed just enough to hold together. Cookie would roll them out on the wagon's fold-down table, cut them with a tin can, and arrange them in the Dutch oven. Hot coals went on the lid and underneath, creating an oven effect that baked perfect golden biscuits in 20 minutes. These biscuits served as bread, plates, and even sandwiches, soaking up stew juices or holding slabs of salt pork for trail meals. Railroad spike jerky. Building the Transcontinental Railroad required feeding thousands of workers in remote locations where fresh meat spoiled within hours. Railroad cooks developed a jerky-making process that could preserve hundreds of pounds of beef using nothing but salt, pepper, and desert sun. They cut beef into strips along the grain, rubbed them with coarse salt and cracked black pepper, then hung them on makeshift racks made from, you guessed it, railroad spikes. The high desert air and intense sun dried the meat in 2 or 3 days, creating jerky so hard it could last months without spoiling. Workers carried strips in their pockets, chewing on them during long shifts, laying track across America. The jerky provided protein and salt to replace what they lost through heavy sweating and desert heat. This technique fed the workforce that connected the East and West coasts, making it one of the most important preserved foods in American history. Burgu. Kentucky settlers created this thick stew that combined whatever meat and vegetables were available into a hearty one-pot meal that fed large groups. Burgu began as a community cooking project, with neighbors contributing ingredients and labor to create massive batches that served entire settlements. The base usually included several types of meat: chicken, beef, pork, and sometimes game like squirrel or rabbit, along with corn, beans, tomatoes, and other vegetables. The stew cooked for hours in large iron kettles, developing complex flavors as ingredients broke down and melded together. Burgu required constant stirring to prevent sticking and burning, making it a social cooking project that brought communities together. The thick consistency came from long cooking that broke down vegetables and meat into almost sauce-like mixture. Each family's burgu recipe differed based on available ingredients and personal preferences, but all versions provided hearty nutrition that sustained hard-working families. The dish became associated with political gatherings, church socials, and other community events where large quantities of food were needed. Burgu represented frontier cooperation and resourcefulness, turning whatever ingredients were available into satisfying meals that fed everyone present. Buffalo tallow corn cakes. Native Americans taught settlers to render buffalo fat into tallow, a versatile cooking fat that burned clean and lasted months without spoiling. Frontier women mixed this tallow with cornmeal and water to create corn cakes that cooked crispy outside and tender inside. The tallow gave these cakes a rich, meaty flavor that satisfied hunger better than ordinary cornbread. They cooked on flat griddles or directly on hot stones, creating a crust that sealed in moisture. These corn cakes served multiple purposes: breakfast with molasses, dinner alongside stew, or trail food that traveled well in saddlebags. The high fat content provided energy needed for physical labor, while corn supplied carbohydrates for quick fuel. As buffalo disappeared from the plains, so did this recipe, since beef tallow couldn't match the unique flavor that buffalo fat provided. Pioneer families treasured their stores of buffalo tallow, knowing it meant the difference between bland food and satisfying meals through long winters. Prairie hen with wild onion skillet fry. Prairie grouse, called prairie hens by settlers, provided fresh meat when larger game proved scarce. These plump birds nested in grasslands and offered tender meat that cooked quickly over open fires. Hunters brought them back to camp where cooks cut them into pieces and fried them in cast iron skillets with wild onions found growing along creek beds. The onions caramelized in the rendered bird fat, creating a sweet and savory combination that made tough frontier life a little more bearable. Prairie hens had dark, flavorful meat that tasted like a cross between chicken and duck, while wild onions added a sharp bite that cut through the richness. Cooks seasoned the dish with wild herbs like sage or thyme when available, creating complex flavors from simple ingredients. The entire meal cooked in one pan, making cleanup easy after long days on the trail. This dish represented the abundance that awaited those willing to live off the land's natural bounty. Trout fire. Mountain streams provided fresh trout that became prized meals for prospectors and trappers working far from supply lines. Trout fire got its name from the cooking method. Fish split open and cooked directly over flames until the skin charred and crackled. The technique required skill to cook the fish through without burning it to ash. Successful cooks learned to control their fire, creating a bed of hot coals that provided steady heat rather than dancing flames. Fresh trout needed little seasoning beyond salt, which many frontier cooks carried in leather pouches. The charred skin peeled away to reveal flaky white meat that tasted like smoke and wilderness. Streamside cooking meant eating immediately, while the fish stayed hot and crispy. This simple preparation highlighted the natural flavors of fresh mountain trout while providing protein that sustained hard-working men through harsh conditions. The recipe disappeared as mining camps emptied and streams became polluted from industrial runoff. Fried cactus and garlic. Mexican vaqueros introduced American cowboys to nopales, the paddle-shaped segments of prickly pear cactus that provided fresh vegetables in desert regions where nothing else grew. Preparing cactus required careful removal of spines and the tiny glochids that could embed in skin, but the reward was worth the effort. The paddles, when young and tender, had a texture similar to green beans, with a slightly tart flavor. Vaqueros sliced them into strips and fried them with wild garlic, found growing near water sources. The combination created a dish that provided essential vitamins missing from a diet heavy in meat and grain. Fried cactus became slimy when overcooked, so skilled cooks learned to fry it quickly over high heat until the edges crisp. Wild garlic added pungent flavor that masked any remaining bitterness from the cactus. This vegetable dish helped prevent scurvy and other nutritional deficiencies common among frontier workers eating limited diets for months at a time. Apple leather. Before candy stores and processed snacks, frontier families created treats from whatever fruit they could grow or gather. Apple leather represented hours of careful work, peeling, coring, and cooking apples until they became thick paste that could be spread thin and dried. Women would lay clean cloth over wooden frames, spread the apple mixture evenly, and place them in sunny spots where air could circulate freely. The drying process took several days, during which the apple paste transformed into flexible sheets that tasted intensely of concentrated fruit. Properly made apple leather lasted months without spoiling, providing sweet energy during long winters when fresh fruit was just a memory. Children treasured pieces of apple leather like candy, while adults appreciated the quick energy it provided during heavy work. The leather could be eaten as is or reconstituted with water to make sauce or pie filling. This preservation method allowed families to enjoy apple harvest bounty throughout the year, making it one of the most valuable food preservation techniques on the frontier. Hardtack and sow belly. Civil War soldiers carried these two items as standard rations, but the combination found new life feeding railroad workers, miners, and anyone working far from civilization. Hardtack was flour and water baked into crackers so hard they could break teeth, while sow belly was salt-cured pork belly that lasted indefinitely without refrigeration. Workers would fry thin slices of sow belly until the fat rendered out, then use that fat to soften pieces of hardtack into something resembling food. The combination provided fat, protein, and carbohydrates in a form that traveled well and wouldn't spoil. Experienced hands learned to check hardtack for weevils before eating. Protein was protein on the frontier. The rendered pork fat could be saved for other cooking, making sow belly a versatile ingredient beyond just eating the meat. This combination fed the workforce that built America's infrastructure, from coast-to-coast railroads to telegraph lines spanning the continent. The monotony of this diet drove men to seek fresh food whenever possible, but hardtack and sow belly kept them alive when nothing else was available. Wild greens and pokeweed salad. Spring brought relief from winter's monotonous diet of preserved foods, as wild greens pushed through thawed ground earlier than any planted crops. Experienced foragers knew which plants provided safe nutrition. Dandelion leaves, lamb's quarters, purslane, and young pokeweed shoots that had to be gathered before they became poisonous. Women and children collected these greens in baskets, creating fresh salads that provided vitamins missing from stored foods. Pokeweed required special knowledge, as mature plants contained toxins that could cause serious illness or death. Only the young shoots, harvested when less than 6 inches tall, were safe to eat. The greens were dressed with rendered fat, vinegar made from apples or wild grapes, and salt when available. This simple salad provided essential nutrients that prevented scurvy and other deficiency diseases common among people eating preserved foods all winter. The tradition of eating wild greens connected settlers to Native American knowledge while providing free food that grew abundantly near homesteads. Pemmican. Native American tribes created the ultimate survival food by combining dried buffalo meat, rendered fat, and berries into dense cakes that lasted years without spoiling. Pemmican provided complete nutrition in portable form, making it essential for long journeys across hostile territory. The process began with cutting buffalo meat into thin strips and drying them completely over smoky fires. The dried meat was then pounded into powder and mixed with melted buffalo fat and dried berries like chokecherries or service berries. The mixture was formed into cakes and wrapped in rawhide for storage. 1 pound of pemmican contained the nutritional equivalent of several pounds of fresh food, making it incredibly efficient for travelers. Fur traders, explorers, and mountain men depended on pemmican to survive months in wilderness areas where hunting might fail. The high fat content provided energy for cold weather survival, while dried berries supplied vitamins needed to maintain health. This concentrated food enabled the exploration and settlement of vast territories by providing reliable nutrition independent of hunting success. Vinegar pie. When fresh fruit was scarce but vinegar was available, resourceful frontier cooks created pies that satisfied sweet cravings using kitchen staples. Vinegar pie combined eggs, butter, sugar, and vinegar in proportions that created custard-like filling with tangy flavor reminiscent of lemon. The acid in vinegar coagulated the eggs during baking, creating texture similar to chess pie without requiring expensive ingredients. Pioneer women guarded their vinegar supplies carefully as it served multiple purposes beyond cooking, preserving food, cleaning, and even medicinal uses. The pie represented ingenuity born from necessity, transforming common pantry items into dessert that lifted spirits during hard times. Children who had never tasted lemons found vinegar pie delightfully tart and sweet, while adults appreciated any break from the monotony of basic frontier fare. The recipe required careful balancing of ingredients, as too much vinegar created inedible sourness, while too little failed to provide the characteristic tang. This dessert demonstrated how frontier cooks adapted recipes to available ingredients, creating new dishes that satisfied cravings for familiar flavors. Rattlesnake stew. Necessity taught frontier dwellers to eat foods that seemed unthinkable to city folks, and rattlesnake provided protein when other meat was scarce. Experienced hunters knew how to kill and skin rattlesnakes safely, removing the head and venom glands before preparing the meat. The white meat tasted surprisingly similar to chicken or fish, with a firm texture that held up well in stews. Cooks cut the snake into sections and browned them in rendered fat, before adding vegetables and liquid for slow cooking. Wild onions, prairie turnips, and any available vegetables went into the pot, along with herbs like wild sage. The stew simmered for hours until the meat became tender and flavorful, creating a hearty meal that provided essential protein. Many frontier families developed a taste for rattlesnake, finding it more flavorful than chicken when properly prepared. The abundance of rattlesnakes in many regions made them a reliable food source for those willing to overcome initial squeamishness. This protein source helped sustain families through times when larger game was scarce or hunting proved unsuccessful. Coffee bean gravy. When coffee beans ran low, frugal cooks found ways to extract every bit of flavor and nutrition from their precious supplies. Coffee bean gravy began with used coffee grounds that were dried, roasted again until dark, then ground finer, and used to make thick gravy. The process created a bitter, coffee-flavored sauce that was served over biscuits, meat, or anything that needed extra flavor. Experienced cooks learned to balance the bitterness with fat, salt, and sometimes molasses or sugar when available. The gravy provided caffeine along with flavor, helping workers stay alert during long days. Trail cooks discovered that burnt flour could substitute for coffee grounds, creating similar dark gravy with a nutty flavor. This resourceful use of coffee grounds meant nothing went to waste, as every bean was precious when supply wagons might not come for months. The gravy became a comfort food that reminded people of better times while providing needed calories from rendered fat and flour thickening. Cowboys would pour coffee bean gravy over everything, making bland food more palatable while stretching coffee supplies as far as possible. Wild rice and venison soup. Native American tribes taught settlers to harvest wild rice from northern lakes and marshes, creating nutritious grain that stored well and provided complete protein when combined with meat. Wild rice grew naturally in shallow waters, requiring canoes and special techniques to harvest without damaging future crops. The grain had a nutty flavor and chewy texture that complemented venison perfectly in hearty soups that sustained families through harsh winters. Preparing wild rice required patience, as it needed thorough cleaning to remove chaff and long cooking to become tender. Venison bones were simmered for hours to create rich broth, then wild rice was added, along with chunks of meat and whatever vegetables were available. The soup cooked slowly, allowing flavors to meld, while rice absorbed the savory broth. This combination provided complete nutrition: protein from venison, carbohydrates from rice, and vitamins from vegetables or wild herbs. The dish represented successful adaptation of Native American techniques by European settlers, creating sustaining food from abundant natural resources. Wild rice soup became a staple in northern territories where rice grew naturally and deer provided reliable protein. Salt horse. Sailors and cowboys shared this unappetizing but necessary food: heavily salted beef or pork that kept indefinitely, but required extensive preparation to become edible. Salt horse earned its name from texture so tough it resembled shoe leather, requiring hours of soaking and boiling to remove excess salt and tenderize the meat. The preservation process packed meat in coarse salt until all moisture was drawn out, creating jerky-like product that wouldn't spoil even in hot climates. Cooks would soak chunks overnight, then boil them in several changes of water to remove salt while slowly rehydrating the meat. The process took most of a day, but resulted in protein that could feed crews when fresh meat was unavailable. Experienced cooks learned to add vegetables, herbs, or anything that might improve the flavor of rehydrated salt horse. The meat provided essential protein and salt replacement for men doing hard physical labor in hot conditions. While nobody looked forward to eating salt horse, it represented reliable nutrition that enabled long voyages and extended stays in remote locations where fresh food was impossible to obtain. Indian pudding. Cornmeal pudding sweetened with molasses became a standard dessert throughout frontier communities where corn grew abundantly, but refined sugar remained expensive. Indian pudding combined cornmeal with milk, molasses, eggs, and spices into custard-like dessert that baked slowly in covered pots over coals. The long, slow cooking allowed cornmeal to fully hydrate while developing complex flavors from caramelized molasses and warming spices like cinnamon and nutmeg. Pioneer families served Indian pudding warm with cream or butter when available, creating comforting dessert that made harsh frontier life more bearable. The pudding provided substantial nutrition beyond just sweetness. Cornmeal supplied carbohydrates and protein, while molasses contributed iron and other minerals. Variations included adding dried apples, nuts, or berries when they could be gathered or grown. The recipe adapted well to available ingredients, with some cooks using maple syrup instead of molasses or adding extra eggs when chickens were productive. This hearty dessert demonstrated how Native American corn preparation techniques combined with European baking methods to create distinctly American frontier cuisine. Fire-roasted prairie turnips. Native Americans introduced settlers to prairie turnips, wild roots that grew abundantly across Great Plains grasslands and provided essential carbohydrates and vitamins. These roots, also called prairie potatoes or Indian turnips, required specific knowledge to harvest safely and prepare properly. The timing was crucial. Roots harvested too early were small and bitter, while those gathered too late became woody and inedible. Fire roasting was the preferred preparation method, with roots buried in coals and ashes until the outer skin charred and the interior became sweet and tender. Properly roasted prairie turnips tasted like sweet potatoes with nutty undertones, providing energy-rich food that could be eaten immediately or dried for winter storage. Gathering prairie turnips required understanding seasonal cycles and recognizing the distinctive above-ground plants when roots were ready. Families would make special trips to harvesting grounds, collecting enough roots to supplement their diet for months. The roasted roots could be ground into flour, adding nutrition and flavor to breads and stews. This wild food helped sustain frontier families through times when cultivated crops failed or supplies ran low. Ash cakes. When regular ovens weren't available and Dutch ovens were too precious to risk, Frontier cooks wrapped cornmeal dough in leaves and buried it directly in hot coals. Ash cakes represented the most primitive form of bread making, requiring only cornmeal, water, salt, and knowledge of fire management. The dough was wrapped in large, non-toxic leaves like corn husks or cabbage leaves, then buried in a bed of hot coals and covered with ashes. The leaf wrapping protected the bread from direct contact with ash while allowing heat to penetrate and cook the dough. Experienced cooks learned to judge cooking time by the smell and feel of the buried packages, removing them when the bread was cooked through but not burned. The resulting bread had a distinctive smoky flavor and slightly gritty texture from ash that inevitably penetrated the leaf wrapping. Ash cakes provided essential carbohydrates when other bread-making methods weren't possible, sustaining travelers and workers in remote locations. The technique worked with various grain flours and could produce edible bread with minimal equipment, making it valuable survival knowledge for anyone venturing into wilderness areas. Spotted dog. This simple pudding combined suet, flour, and dried fruit into boiled dumpling that provided dessert when more elaborate sweets weren't possible. Spotted dog got its name from the appearance of raisins or currants scattered through white pudding like spots on a Dalmatian. The dish required suet, hard fat from around animal kidneys, which was chopped fine and mixed with flour, a pinch of salt, and whatever dried fruit was available. Water was added gradually to form stiff dough that was shaped into a ball and wrapped in cloth for boiling. The pudding boiled for hours in large pots of water, creating dense, filling dessert that satisfied sweet cravings while providing substantial calories. Sailors especially favored spotted dog as it kept well and provided variety from standard ship rations. The high fat content made it very satisfying, while dried fruit added sweetness and vitamins missing from preserved foods. Families would make spotted dog for special occasions or when they had access to suet from butchering, creating treats that children especially enjoyed. The pudding could be eaten warm with molasses or cold as portable food for travelers. Mock turtle soup. When real turtle wasn't available, but people craved the rich, gelatinous soup that turtle meat provided, creative cooks developed mock turtle soup using calf's head or other organ meats. The soup required cooking tough cuts long enough to break down connective tissues and create the characteristic thick, rich broth. Calf's head was preferred because it contained plenty of collagen that created natural gelatin when slowly simmered. The meat was cleaned thoroughly, then simmered with vegetables and herbs for hours until it became tender and the broth achieved proper consistency. Mock turtle soup provided essential nutrients missing from basic frontier diets: gelatin for joint health, organ meat vitamins, and rich broth that was easily digested. The soup was often saved for sick family members or served at special occasions when extra nutrition was needed. Preparing mock turtle soup required skill and patience, as the long cooking process had to be managed carefully to achieve proper texture without overcooking the meat. This economical substitute allowed frontier families to enjoy a dish associated with fine dining while using affordable ingredients that might otherwise be wasted. Syllabub. This frothy drink combined wine or hard cider with cream, creating refreshing beverage that provided calories and alcohol for celebrations or medicinal purposes. Syllabub required fresh cream that was whipped while slowly adding wine or cider, creating light, foamy mixture that could be drunk immediately or allowed to separate into layers. The acid in wine or cider partially curdled the cream, creating texture somewhere between drink and dessert. Frontier families often made syllabub for special occasions, like weddings, holidays, or when entertaining rare visitors. The drink provided nutrition from cream fat and protein, while alcohol from wine or cider helped preserve it briefly and provided relaxation after hard work. Sugar or honey was added when available, creating sweet treat that children could enjoy in small quantities. Syllabub represented luxury on the frontier, as it required fresh dairy products and alcoholic beverages that weren't always available. The preparation became part of the entertainment as guests watched the transformation from liquid ingredients to frothy beverage. This drink connected frontier families to European traditions while adapting to available American ingredients like hard cider made from abundant wild apples. Hasty pudding. This quick cornmeal pudding provided hot, filling meal when time was short and ingredients were limited. Hasty pudding combined cornmeal with boiling water or milk, stirring constantly to prevent lumps while cooking just long enough to soften the grain. The pudding could be sweetened with molasses, honey, or maple syrup when available, or served savory with salt and butter. Speed was essential. The pudding cooked in minutes rather than hours, making it valuable when hungry workers needed immediate sustenance. The texture ranged from thick porridge to stiff pudding depending on the ratio of liquid to cornmeal and cooking time. Hasty pudding provided quick energy from cornmeal carbohydrates while requiring minimal fuel and attention compared to more complex dishes. Families often ate hasty pudding for breakfast, dinner, or any time when simple, filling food was needed quickly. The recipe adapted easily to available ingredients: water when milk was scarce, different sweeteners based on supply, or additional ingredients like dried fruit when they could be spared. This simple dish sustained countless frontier families through busy seasons when elaborate cooking wasn't practical, but nutrition remained essential for survival and hard work. Chicken Marengo. Start with a savory stew featuring tender chicken cooked with tomatoes, garlic, onions, and white wine, often garnished with mushrooms and sometimes even prawns. Chicken Marengo, named after the Battle of Marengo, has an intriguing backstory. Legend has it that Napoleon's chef, after a victorious battle in 1800, created this meal from the available ingredients, as Napoleon refused to eat until something was prepared. The dish became a popular part of French cuisine and eventually made its way to American kitchens. Once a staple in cookbooks and food magazines as an exotic yet accessible dish, chicken marengo, like oyster stew, eventually faded from the spotlight. Hawaiian haystacks. When it comes to quick and convenient meals, Hawaiian haystacks certainly took the cake. This versatile dish begins with a bed of rice, generously topped with a savory chicken sauce and adorned with an assortment of fresh, crunchy toppings. So why did we ever stop making these? The true origins of Hawaiian haystacks remain a bit of a mystery, but they surged in popularity during the 1970s as a fun, interactive meal for families. Back then, it was all about turning simple ingredients into festive and versatile meals. Interestingly, despite its name, Hawaiian haystacks have no known connection to Hawaii. They are believed to have originated in the continental United States, likely within the Mormon community, where they were popularized as a crowd-pleasing dinner option. Before we move to the next dish, don't forget to subscribe to our channel and hit the bell icon to receive notifications. Your support means a lot to our small channel. Celery Victor. If I had a magic wand, I'd definitely bring this one back right after bringing back Celery Victor. If you guessed it, the dish was created by Victor Hartzler, a chef at San Francisco's St. Francis Hotel around the early 20th century. It became popular through author Clarence Edwards, who featured it in his 1914 book, A Bohemian Guide to San Francisco Restaurants. By the 1970s, it made its way into middle-class homes due to the growing interest in Greek cooking at home. To make this dish, blanch celery in broth and vinegar until tender, then strain and cool. Next, whisk olive oil, vinegar, Dijon mustard, and herbs for the marinade. Now, pour over celery, and marinate in the fridge for several hours or overnight. Celery Victor was a popular meal, loved for its low-calorie content and great taste. I don't know why we stopped making it, but it would be great to have it on our tables again. Steak Diane. Next is this really tasty steak called Steak Diane. Trust me, it has nothing to do with a woman named Diane. Steak Diane is a retro classic that brought a touch of restaurant elegance to home kitchens in the 1970s. It is said to have originated in the 1950s. By the 1970s, Steak Diane had made its way into home kitchens, celebrated for its dramatic preparation and luxurious flavors. How? Well, a little bird told me that New York chef Beniamino Schiavone thought it was a bright idea to name this meal after Diana, the goddess of the hunt, to attract high society diners. I guess it worked. Steak Diane was made with steaks, shallots, Dijon mustard, Worcestershire sauce, and heavy cream. If you've never had these, you're missing out on something, and if you did, would you want to try it again? Chicken Kiev. Chicken Kiev is a classic dish that became popular in the 1970s, particularly for special occasions and dinner parties. This dish consists of a chicken breast, stuffed with a mixture of butter, garlic, and herbs, then breaded and fried until golden brown. When cut into, the melted butter oozes out, creating a rich and flavorful sauce. The origins of chicken Kiev are debated, with some attributing it to Russian or Ukrainian cuisine, while others believe it was created in France. Regardless of its origins, chicken Kiev became a beloved dish in the 1970s, known for its elegant presentation and delicious taste. Borscht. Borscht was a vibrant, comforting dish that graced many American tables in the 1970s. This beet-based soup is renowned for its deep red color and tangy flavor, achieved by simmering beets, cabbage, and potatoes in a savory broth. Often enriched with beef or pork, borscht offers a hearty, satisfying meal perfect for chilly days. It's typically served hot with a dollop of sour cream and a sprinkle of fresh dill, enhancing its rich, earthy taste. Popularized in the U.S. by Eastern European immigrants, borscht brought a touch of old-world tradition to 1970s kitchens. Its unique flavor and vibrant color made it a standout dish, reflecting a growing interest in diverse international cuisines during the era. Even though it's less common today, borscht remains a beloved reminder of the era's culinary explorations. Herring salad. This vibrant and tangy dish added a punch of flavor to 1970s spreads. It features pickled herring mixed with diced apples, onions, beets, and potatoes in a creamy dressing of mayonnaise and sour cream. Herring salad, also called herring under a fur coat or shuba, has roots in Northern and Eastern European cuisine. The addition of vegetables and a creamy dressing makes it both visually appealing and flavorful. It became popular in the U.S. in the 1970s at potlucks and family gatherings. The salad was often featured in cooking magazines as a bold and sophisticated dish for entertaining. No wonder Russians see it as one of the best salads ever, placed side by side with steamed pudding. I don't know which one I'd choose. Which would you go for? Tuna casserole. Tuna casserole was a staple in many households during the 1970s, known for its comforting flavors and ease of preparation. This dish typically consists of canned tuna, egg noodles, and a creamy sauce made from condensed soup, all baked together with a topping of breadcrumbs or crushed potato chips for added crunch. Tuna casserole was a budget-friendly and convenient option for busy families, making it a go-to meal for weeknight dinners. While it may not be as trendy today, tuna casserole still holds a special place in the hearts of those who grew up with it as a comforting and satisfying meal. The recipes that fed America's frontier have largely disappeared from modern kitchens, replaced by convenience foods that our ancestors couldn't imagine. These dishes tell stories of resourcefulness, adaptation, and the human ability to create sustaining meals from whatever nature provided. While we may not return to eating son-of-a-gun stew or salt horse, understanding these forgotten foods connects us to the hardy people who built our nation one meal at a time, proving that creativity and determination could turn the humblest ingredients into the fuel that powered American expansion westward.